life. I mean,
Right.
very often interviewers will go straight from the book to the life,
Right.
and you seem to do that, which is, of course, very gratifying to an
Yeah.
author.
Yeah.
Is that something you're aware of, or is it just that you like the books and so that's why you ask about them? Are you conscious of that?
Well, we're very choosy about our authors, and if it comes to fiction, I have to like it.
Yeah.
Because it's a big investment of time, and you know, I care enough about fiction that I want good writers on the show.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think you can do, especially if it's a novel, you don't want to do an interview that's like a book report.
Right.
You know, then in chapter 2 and then in chapter 7, you don't want to give away the plot.
Right.
So what I'm always looking for is, who is the person who wrote this book? You know, and why would they have a character, you know, an 87-year-old mute character, or something like that? You know, what is it about this writer that they might want to come up with that as an idea? So I also spend a fair amount of time and have my producers do a lot of research on just who these people are. So for me, and I think for anything in the arts, you want to connect the writer, the artist, with the person. And I think for listeners, that's more interesting than just doing an interview about what happened in a novel. Now, for nonfiction, you know, we're much more broad-based, and we're looking, obviously, for good writers, but interesting topics as well. And that gives us, of course, a lot to talk about. I mean, everything from religion to politics and science and whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think, I'm personally, I'm always interested in, why did this person do this?
Why did this get written?
Yeah. How did this get written? Exactly.
Well, speaking of the arts, recently you made your theater debut.
I did.
In the Vagina monologues.
did.
That must have been quite an experience. Could you tell us a little bit
Sure.
about that? I mean, we actually produced that play here at Drexel a few years ago.
Oh, it's a great play.
It's a great play, and I can imagine that it must have been something to make your debut in that play of all plays.
It certainly was. And the funny thing was, it was in the fall of 2000, and I got the call in the summer of 2000, and we were broadcasting from the Republican Convention in Philadelphia. And I think, interviewed Newt Gingrich and whatever, and I get back to my office and get a call from, I guess it was the Annenberg company, wanting to know whether I wanted to do the Vagina monologues. I thought, you know, I just hadn't been in a place where the word vagina would never have been uttered.
Yes.
And here's this guy, never met, asked me if I wanted to be in the play, and of course I said yes, and I hung up, and I was absolutely terrified. But
had you had any theater experience?
I had gone to a girls' school, so I was Nathan Detroit, the Artful Dodger. I'd had a lot of boys' parts.
Okay.
This was my first girls' part.
Okay.
And the team could not have been better.
Yeah.
So I sat in for a week with 2 real actors.
Yeah.
And they were great. The producer was great, and it was so much fun.
I can imagine.
And I didn't have to, you know, you work off of cards, so you don't have to memorize your part, which was even better.
Yeah.
And I had never had so much fun in my life.
So would you do this again? Would you
I actually just did with 2 friends in Bucks County to raise some money. We did it a month or so ago, and it was obviously much smaller scale, but it also was just
that's
fun.
nice.
It was fun.
Well, you do a lot of other things. I mean, you substitute. You're now the formal substitute for Terry Gross on Fresh Air.
I have done that for a long, long time,
Yeah.
and then a couple of years ago, I just was getting so busy with my other show that they actually got some other people to come in who were just more available.
But you've done that for a while.
Absolutely.
And you do a lot of moderating of town
have done
forums,
that.
election coverage, the public library events.
Yes.
Those must be wonderful because they get great people.
They do. They do. Oh, I've interviewed some really, really exciting people there.
Now, how do you manage all this? You have a husband.
I'm crazy.
And you have a school-age son, am I right?
He just graduated. Well, he graduated from college a year ago.
Oh,
so
okay. So he's not in the
he's a
house.
young man.
Yeah,
no,
yes.
he's not in the house.
Yes, I have one of those too.
Yeah.
So they're not really underfoot anymore,
not.
but still you think about them.
All the time.
So do you find, though, do you thrive on this sort of schedule? Do you feel frazzled? I mean, how do you work out your time?
From being a very disorganized person, I have become a very sort of focused, organized person. And so I organize my life so that as busy as it is, and I do put in a lot of time, I manage to play, and I play tennis, and I garden, and go to the movies, and I love to cook, and I take my dog for walks, and I buy.
You have a dog?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I make sure that I have a balanced life, because I don't think you can be a fresh interviewer if if you don't live if you just live in your head all the time.
Right.
So and oftentimes I like to do things just to get out of my brain.
Yeah. Well, it shows, I think, in the way you conduct yourself on the show. Getting back to Radio Times, you really occupy the role on the show of a mediating sensibility, and yet there are times when I sense that your own views are peeking through. Now, can you tell me a bit about to what extent you feel comfortable having a position, expressing a position, and to what extent you feel your role is to be a mediator and to not express what you think?
Right.
And it must be hard to keep a balance there.
It is a tricky thing, and I think if you're, and you know, we try to be fair. I don't think you can be entirely objective on everything. I mean, we all have opinions about things.
Right.
But I think if you know your opinions, then I think it's important to realize that there are other points of view, and I want to create a place, an environment, a show where people can talk about things.
Yeah.
And I don't have any rules about it, and it'll, as you say, kind of sneak out every now and then. I don't think the show is about, it's not the world according to me.
Right.
I think there's too much ego in broadcast anyway. But I do think that there are times, and perhaps it's just like a little voice in me or a little, nudginess that I get where I feel like this feels appropriate, that I'm going to say my piece or say whatever it is. And to me, it's, I don't want to overwhelm the show or the conversation, but sometimes I just feel like the right and honest thing to do.
Well, has there been an instance where you felt that you just sort of got overwhelmed by a feeling either of outrage or irritation? And can you give an example?
Sure. I think the whole Terry Schiavo situation, I was outraged by the whole thing. I just the use of this family, all of this family, the parents, the what was said about the husband, even about her, I was just appalled. And we did a number of different shows, and it wasn't about me being appalled about it, but we tried to get very focused shows that talked about, politics and medicine, when those two things collide, or medical ethics, or what it is to really deal with people in these dying days, just to try to rate the conversation.
Right.
I remember when little Elian Gonzalez, they were fighting over him. I was infuriated that this little boy was being kept from his father.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I thought it was just child abuse.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in one of my obsessive rages about that.
Yeah.
But I just
and yet your callers would often be on the other side.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Yes, they were. But I felt like this is wrong.
Yeah.
This is wrong. Maybe I was wrong, but that's.
Yeah,
that's
but there was a case where, though, when you did express your view,
Yes.
when it came through, it was done with some degree of calculation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never feel you lose control.
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, occasionally, I'm sure I go too far. I get
Yeah.
angry about something.
Yeah.
But I try not to.
Yeah. Well, your tone is one, I guess, if I were to characterize it as firm but casual. And I wonder if you feel you have developed that over the years. And if so, how did you do so, and maybe who your role models were, if there are people that you look to in interviewing, but perhaps in other areas that you look to as models for developing the persona that you project on the radio.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I without putting words to it, I think I do want it to be an inviting place, and I want to be able to laugh and be silly at times and have an inviting persona about the whole show. But and perhaps I've just learned over the times that you do have to be firm. I mean, so the way a kindergartner, sometimes a teacher has to be firm, because
fun but firm.
Fun but firm.
Right.
But this is serious stuff. We have something to accomplish, whatever it is during that hour. There are issues and people and ideas and things to talk about. So I think, without thinking about it consciously, probably listening back to myself, thinking, oh, that's not so good, and then just knowing the next time that thing comes around, trying to do something different. But I'm pretty self-critical. So
were there teachers or personalities or people in your life that you think have been inspirations or role models in that regard?
Well, I spent some time before Terry Gross went national. I was kind of a lowly volunteer at HYY, but worked on her show as a local show as I think an associate producer or something.
Okay.
So I got to watch how she works, and I have tremendous respect for the kind of hard work that she does.
Yeah.
And she generously allowed me to do some interviews, and so that was really nice and early on, and gave me some pointers. We also had a station manager at the time, a gentleman named Bill Siemering, who actually was one of the great founders of in National Public Radio, All Things Considered was really his idea. And he was a station manager there, and he was tough with me, but he also was very generous and gave me lots and lots of opportunities. So helped to sort of shape.
He was your mentor.
He was absolutely my mentor. And Terry, another one as well.
You worked also on Family Matters, didn't you?
I actually
for a short
started
period?
that show, years and years ago. I did.
That's quite a range that you've had in a way of experience.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, you're such a Philadelphia personality now. Do you see yourself linked in a sense? You didn't grow up in Philadelphia.
I did not.
But how would you characterize the Philadelphia audience and the Philadelphia sensibility? And do you feel you've assimilated it to yourself?
I think so. Yeah. I've really lived in and around the city since about 1970, so I do know it well. I used to work for a federally funded program working in schools in the city. So I worked in a school in West Philly and in one in South Philly, and I worked in a mental health center in Kensington, North Philly. So I feel like I know this city very well, and I love it. I think it's down to earth.
It does have a distinctive personality.
It does. It's not hoity-toity. It's got all the problems that big cities have, of course.
Yeah.
But it has, of course, this great history, great culture, and I love being associated with it. And I feel very connected to it. And I feel like I understand it, too.
Well, that comes across. Is there a guest that you haven't had that you would, a dream guest that you would like to have, perhaps in the near future?
Oh, I know I should have a ready answer to that
No,
question.
that came off the top of my head, so I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Well, it's funny because I've been doing this almost 20 years.
Really?
And I think when I started off, I thought, I'd like to talk to, Nelson Mandela, and, the sort of typical list. And I think over time I've learned that some of the greatest guests are people I've never heard of.
Yeah. And
some of the greatest hour conversations I've had are people who will never be famous, but we've just had this nice connection, this nice synergy. So it's not like I've given up on hoping for the big names, but
you enjoy
I enjoy
the regular
surprises, really.
I do think that's true. Some of the best shows I've heard of yours have been just the conversation that goes on and the odd areas you touch on.
Right.
Well, I'll end by asking you something which a number of people have asked me when I told them that I was interviewing you, and they wondered whether someday you would consider running for public office.
Oh, that's so funny.
I mean, you've done acting now. You've done all kinds of public forums. You have this show, and that would seem to be a natural, possible future move. Has it occurred to you? Have you been asked this?
Never occurred. Never have been asked that, because people, my friends know what my life is really about, and they know that in today's prying press, I probably would never make it out of the box. But it's not that I don't have respect for people in public office, and I think it's a tremendously hard and important job, but it just feels like a straitjacket to me.
Really?
Something like that. And I'm always so disappointed when you see how people that have this whole other life become this half person when they have to answer questions with the press, and
I understand.
It feels limiting to me, whereas now I feel like I have a lot of freedom. Really.
It's true. I mean, you range so widely, and I guess you wouldn't want to put yourself in a box.
I don't think I would.
Well, I want to thank you so much for talking
Bob.
to us today. It was really great.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you for joining us for the Drexel interview.